Okay, welcome to this really short lunchtime career check-in masterclass. And I'm going to be going through some really great content to help you really check in with your career, where you're at right now, and what you're looking to do next. So regardless if you are reasonably happy in your current role or you're looking to change things quite fundamentally, this will give you some really good tools to get started with. So before I dive into the content I wanted to share today, I wanted to share with you as well just a little bit about me. So for those of you who haven't met me yet, my name is Emmy Peterson, and I am an expat of many years, but I wanted to share, I guess more so than the countries I've lived in, I wanted to share with you a little bit about the roles that I've had. Great to see a few people joining on the call. This recording will be made available for you all after the call. So great to see you. So what we're going to do is I'm going to just share with you the 3 simple steps to check in with your career. And my name is Emmy Peterson. I have held quite a few roles in my past. So my first role or my first career was in retail and political science back when I lived in Sweden. I then moved to the US in my 20s and worked in childcare. I then moved across to the UK, where I've lived for a few years before Australia, which was a HR admin and finance focus. And finally, I've lived in Australia for just over 10 years now and worked mainly in media, sales, marketing, and coaching, which is why you're here with me today. And I wanted to share that because if you're anything like me, you may have had a pretty broad and varied career journey where you've done quite a few different things, whether that be paid work or volunteering work or a combination of the two. And it's really important to remember this as we position for our future career, because all this stuff is resources that are available to you. So great to see a few more people joining the call. We're going to dive into the content now. I'm going to keep it short and sweet, and you will also be getting the recording for this session in your email inbox a little bit later. Also, if you do have any questions at all as I'm talking, I will make some room for questions at the very end. So feel free to put the questions in the chat box. And if you don't want other people on the call to see your question, just type it in directly to me and I'll have a read through those at the very end. Okay, before we dive into the 3 simple steps that I'm going to share with you, I wanted to do what I call the top line reality check. And the top line reality check is a very simple thing to, I guess, allow you to check with where you're at right now. So the first thing being, and this is one of my favorites, remember that you deserve to do something that really matters for you. And also, I might add, that matters for you right now, because when you started your career, however many years ago that was, you may have changed and your interests in different things may have changed since then. So you deserve to do something that matters for you now, as well as you have to be willing to focus and sacrifice a little bit to create this change. And a lot of people may not feel that way. They want the change to happen, but they're not really willing to put in the work. And it does require a bit of focus to be able to change your career, especially if you're looking to do a big career transition. Okay, so I often talk about this one. This one is the magic triangle. And I call it the magic triangle because it is like a triangle or a 3-legged stool. The right job for you actually has 3 different components to it. The first one being fun. So if your job or your career is not fun and enjoyable at times, and if it's just challenge and hard work and a slog, you're not going to enjoy it and you're not going to thrive in it. You're not going to be your most creative self in it. So if you've gotten to a point where your career or your job is no longer fun, this is something to consider for you. Next up, a good role or a good career needs a bit of challenge. We like to be comfortable as humans, but if it's no challenge at all, we get to a point where we start to feel like it's really boring and really flat and not a lot of stuff is happening. And it is really, really important to remember that when you are thinking and checking in with yourself. And finally, we need to look at things that you are naturally good at, especially if you are mid-career or a little bit older. I would say this is extra important. It doesn't mean that you cannot get really good at something later on in life, but you are much better off working to the strengths that you already have rather than trying to be someone different. And I don't mean that you shouldn't learn new software, new technology, that kind of stuff. What I mean, for example, is that if you are a really organized, structured person, that is probably a natural trait for you. So you should probably continue to work in environments that allows you to be structured and organized. But as you can probably appreciate, there's a lot of different tasks or different roles you could do within that. So that is the magic triangle that I would like you to have in the back of your mind as we go through the coming slides, which I will cover the 3 key steps for how you can reflect on your career right now. So the very first step we got to do is to look at the now. A lot of people forget about this, or a lot of people don't like this bit, simply because when we don't feel great about our career or our work, it's very easy to kind of go, I want to just get out of this and do something else. I just want this annoying or uncomfortable part to be over. So a key thing that I will say is make sure that you're taking stock of how you're feeling right now. You don't have to do this right now, but if you want to, when you watch the recording, have a little think about how you are tracking on a scale from 1 to 10, 1 being low or not great, and 10 being great or fantastic. And ask yourself on that scale from 1 to 10, how do you currently feel about your current career prospects if you're not working at the moment, or your career satisfaction if you're in a current role or a volunteering role right now? You know, where on that scale from 1 to 10 are you sitting? How are you tracking with your self-confidence? So I have separate videos on this that I'd be happy to share. If you're interested, feel free to drop me an email after this session. I'll be happy to share that free video with you. But self-confidence is essentially how confident and capable you feel to do the things you do in your career. So chances are, if you've done something for a really long time, you've been in administration or whatever you've been doing, you probably feel quite capable, meaning that your confidence is probably reasonably high. If you're looking to fundamentally change what you do, though, you're probably having some confidence challenges because you probably haven't done that thing you're looking to change into, if that makes sense. Thirdly, how are you tracking with your self-esteem? So your self-confidence is how capable you feel. Your self-esteem is how you're feeling with yourself. How's your relationship with yourself right now? Are you feeling good about yourself? Are you beating yourself up a lot? Are you feeling happy, unhappy? You know, essentially, if you were to grade this on a scale from 1 to 10, how good a friend are you with yourself right now? That's a really good thing to check in with as well. And finally, think about your 3 biggest career-related challenges right now. So if you're reasonably comfortable in your job and you're just joining this call today to get some inspiration and checking in with yourself, I am fairly sure that you still have some career-related challenges in your life. If you're really unhappy, which happens at times when I work with people one-on-one, they go, everything is wrong, Emmy, nothing's great. And that might very well be the case. But if that is so for you, draw out the specific things that are the most challenging. Is it your manager's communication style? Is it something else that is bothering you more? You may not have 3, but if you have a lot going on at your work and you're not quite that happy, I would challenge you to write down the core 3 ones. I've heard that a few more people have joined the call, which is fantastic. So just for you, if you've just recently joined us, I am just running through the 3 steps. And at the very end, I'll answer any questions you have. And you will also be getting the video recording in your email inbox in a few hours if you missed the start of the session. All right, let's continue. The second step that we want to look at is your past. So your past is obviously a really important part of a career transition. And again, a lot of people, when they want to change, they start asking me questions like, I want to plan forward, I want to do this thing instead. And sometimes that means that we forget about the things that we did in the past. So I can assure you, and this happens often, you are not starting from scratch. Even if you fundamentally want to change what you do from, I don't know, marketing to painting or whatever it might be, you are still not starting from scratch because you have a unique skill set and experiences with you that are valuable. So some questions here to ask yourself is, what jobs did you enjoy the most and why? And I'd encourage you to think broadly here. So it's not just about a perfect job you had in the past or something like that. It can be elements of a job. For example, I shared this in the call that I had last night, this masterclass. I ran one yesterday evening as well. And I remember when I worked for an cycling event organization a couple of years ago, and it was hard work. But one thing I loved about that job was running events and hanging out with people and seeing people achieve their goals. It was a really rewarding part of that role, even if it had other challenges. So as you look back at previous roles, volunteering gigs, or it could even be during your student time or engagement that you did when you were a student, what job or jobs did you enjoy the most and why specifically? Who was the best leader or manager you ever had? Or you might have a top two or a top three. And what about them made them great? Were they thoughtful and considerate? Were they quite direct? Were they very driven? Did they challenge you a lot? So look at the themes in your past and the people and the leaders who have really brought out the best in you or that you've enjoyed and felt the most thriving and creative around. And this one, a lot of people forget about because we don't always see, I call it our blind spot. We all have things that we're naturally good at. And sometimes we don't see that as a gift or a skill. We kind of see it as a given. For example, me personally, I'm a pretty organized person. And for many years, I was like, well, that's an obvious thing. It's just something that I do. But it is really, really valuable to somebody else as well. So look for feedback in previous jobs or, like I said, volunteering, or even when you were at university. What did you tend to get stuck doing, quote unquote? Or what did people over those years tell you that you were good at? Because everyone has something, or I dare say several things that we're good at. So do a little stock take and write down some of the things and some of the feedback from your past. And this is a really great way to do that metaphorical career stock take and make sure that you are not selling yourself short and you are certainly not starting over from scratch. Okay, and then step 3, and this is the common question. This is where most people want to focus their energy and skip step 1 and 2, which, as you can understand, puts you in a different position. But the third step that you want to do is look at what's next from here. Most people want to wait till the ducks are beautifully lined up like they are in this picture, and then they want to start taking action and changing their career. But in reality, it's actually one of those things that you need to allow yourself to take action before the ducks are lined up. And how do you do that? Well, the biggest thing is to focus on what you know that you want. And I'll explain this a bit more. Many people come to me and they say, Emmy, I don't want a manager like this, or I didn't like this thing about my past job. The thing about our brain, and you've probably heard this before, but I'll say it again, our brain can't process negatives. So if I tell you to think of a pink elephant wearing a top hat balancing on a tightrope, you will have to first think about the elephant to then not think about it. And the same goes for career or attracting people, jobs, and other things into our life. So instead of staring yourself blind at the things that you don't want, focus on the elements that you do know that you want. And I'll show you how that works. Before we do that, I also want you to allow yourself to park the need for the specific role or title you feel that you should have. A lot of people come to me and they don't really know where to take their career next. And sometimes it's because we're trying to label things when we're not ready to label them yet, especially if you're changing careers significantly. So rather than focusing on what title or what exact role you're going to have, start asking yourself some different questions, which I'll share with you in a moment. I will also say, if you have a very specific role or goal in your mind, there's nothing wrong with working towards that, but it's not helpful if you're feeling confused about where you'd like to go next, if that makes sense. Okay, so now we're going to go, rather than getting specific on the role, we're going to cast the net a little bit more widely and brainstorm what type of organization or company you see yourself working with. And some prompters that you might want to consider in that process are things like, what kind of values would you like that company to hold? For example, if you're very passionate about the environment and living sustainably, you may want to look at a company or join a company that values that as well. Values can be a little bit hard to find, but you can tease out if you're looking at a company's About Us page or you're reading articles about the type of work that they do and the type of community engagement they have, you can pretty quickly get a feel for what the company values are. You can sometimes also find them when you read in the About Us section. They might sometimes have like mission and vision and things like that. That's where you can sort of start to see the company values come through. But think about it, because values are really important, and I cover that in my career coaching programs as well. The size of the company, this is actually quite an important one, and especially with 2020 and 2021, many of us have been working from home in different formats as well. So size of company has become perhaps less important in some ways. But think about it, think back on your career. Do you know sort of the size of organization that suits you best? Do you want a huge global company that has a really big presence and lots of different departments? Do you prefer a startup style or somewhere in between? So even if you don't know the title, you can probably start seeing by now that you can actually get a lot of information from yourself on what you want. And remember to word this in the positive. So I would like to work for a company of size X, and strike out that don't, which we tend to focus on. Next up is think about the manager and team. So we talked before about the best manager or leader you ever had. What kind of manager would you like to have? A really direct and straightforward one, a very caring and nurturing one? What kind of manager would suit you and your personality best? And your team as well. What size of the team? What would you like the feel in the team to be? Is it that people are challenging each other, or more like people are supporting and helping each other? What sort of flavor is important for you? Where would you like this job to be based? A lot of us at the moment have been working from home on and off because of COVID and other things, but would you like a job that's all remote, half and half? Would you like that office to be close to where you live? Start putting in place some thoughts around what it is that you are wanting to attract. And finally, communication, which sort of goes hand in hand with culture. So a really important thing is to know, how would you like the communication and the culture of that company to be? Slightly different from the values, because the values is more sort of what's important to them and what are they about. Communication and culture is a little bit more around, how do you connect with other people in the company? Is it a very social organization? Do people use a lot of online channels like Slack and Teams and things like that? So getting clear on those things can hugely help you start outlining, even if you don't have the title ready, where you'd like to go next. All right, and then you go, Amy, that's a lot of great tips, but how do I actually work through these questions? And I've made it very easy for you to do that. So on the screen, you see a career check-in document that I've created for you. If you hop over to my website, thebridgecoaching.com.au, there's a button right at the top of the website that says download the free checklist. So if you want to go through the questions that I've covered here today and some more stuff, you can just download that free guide, no obligation or anything, and you get an instant email with the PDF guide in your inbox. So you can work your way through the different questions, plus some other gold nuggets that I've got in there for you. And I would recommend, if you are going to go through that exercise, put aside between 30 and 45 minutes. So probably the equivalent of another lunch break, because you're joining me here today on this lunch break, and go through the questions. You don't have to overthink them. Just kind of grade yourself and work your way through the document. And I assure you, by the end of it, you'll have a much clearer idea of where you want to go next. This is really valuable, even if you're not looking at changing jobs right now. This is still a really worthwhile exercise to do with your current role or your current company kept in mind. And before we go to questions, so please put any questions in the comment box. I will be checking in on your comments very, very shortly and answering any questions you have. But I also wanted to share a special coaching bundle that I have that's available in June 2021 only. I know that COVID and other things have caused a lot of challenges for people when it comes to their career. And I've put together a couple of tools in a really good value bundle for you to make it as easy as possible. So what you get with this package is that you get my online career coaching program, which is a step-by-step process to take what we've talked about today completely to the next level and help you map out your career plan, including specifically what jobs and companies you'd apply for. I have an online interview preparation course as well, the Ultimate Job Interview. You get that program as well. And both of these online programs you get lifetime access to. So they sit there in your online profile and you can access them at any time, however many times you want to. And dedicated to this bundle, you also get a 60-minute one-on-one coaching session with me, where we work and review your current situation and map out the immediate next steps for you. So if you bought all this separately, it would cost you $499, which I think is still pretty valuable for all the change and all the expert tips that you do get. But before 30 June, you get access to all these three elements for $247. So I will be sending out an email after the call with the video recording and a link to this offer if you are interested in taking it up. But I've tried to make it as easy as possible to help you as much as possible in your career transition, because I know we all need help sometimes, myself included. Okay, so that is the key steps that I wanted to share with you today, but I did want to leave some time for your questions as well. So let me just quickly check in here on any questions. Okay, I'll just let you guys type in your questions in the chat box there while we're waiting. A great question that I had from someone on yesterday's call that I thought was worth sharing with you guys as well is how, for many of us, it's hard to know if a company, on the inside is what they look like on the outside. I do cover this in detail, especially in the job interview preparation course. There's a whole segment on that. But what I would recommend you to do, if you're not really sure about a company or a specific organization, it is really important to look at a couple of different areas to look for discrepancies. So the first way to know that they are aligned with what they say is to look at things like their About Us page, their mission and vision and values page, and look at how they talk about themselves there versus how they talk about their products and services. If there's a huge mismatch in language or things like that, it can be really, really good to use that as a bit of a gut feel. And if you are going to go to an interview with them, to ask some questions about it. Another great page is a website called Glassdoor.com. And as far as I know, it's present in most countries. It certainly is used a lot here in Australia. And here in Australia, it's glassdoor.com.au. And this is for any organization that is of a decent size, you would be able to just look them up in the search function. You'll be able to see anonymous feedback of people who worked at that company. You'd be able to see when they left the review, so if it was very recent or if it was longer ago. You can also get an indication of salaries and other things as well. So Glassdoor.com is a great tool that I strongly encourage people to look at. The other way you can also find out a little bit more is to look at the Google review page for that organization. Sometimes you will see customer reviews in there, and sometimes there will be staff reviews. But if you're seeing a lot of complaints, etc., it could be an interesting insight into that company, both what they do and how they position themselves. As always with reviews, both on Glassdoor, Google reviews, and other places, do remember that people are a lot more prone to leave a negative review if they are unhappy than they are to leave a positive review if they were happy with the product or service. So take it with a grain of salt, but do remember that that is an important part. Okay, let's see what we've got here. Okay, is communication from the organization... Oh, some great questions coming up here. I'll see if I can get to all of them. Is communication from the organization you are targeting, or type of communication you're after? Your preference in communication. Oh yeah, great. That's a great question. So you probably want to look for how that organization communicates with you. And yes, it has to do with how you prefer to be communicated with. So let's take for an example that if you're being called to an interview with an organization and the comms that you're getting is really abrupt and to the point, and you are more of a you find it more important that, it might be an email, but also phone call follow-up. So it starts to give you a little bit of insight as to how they communicate internally as well. But yeah, generally speaking, it's probably, if it's formal or informal communication, is it the type of organization where they're fine with you emailing or texting your boss, or is it something that has to be kind of run through a particular channel? So it's probably a flavor of both communication and culture. I trust that makes sense, but feel free to email me on this email address on the screen at the moment if you do have any further questions. Okay, we've got a great question here. Do you know if it's more difficult for women in their 40s and 50s to make career changes? Are there things that work against them in interviews, etc.? Look, I don't think there's any evidence to suggest that it's any harder for men or for women. When we get to the mid-career mark, which is a really good point, and that's where I focus a lot on my one-on-one work, it is really important to work with ourselves and our mindset, because the thing, especially for women, I find, is that we sell ourselves a little bit short, and we can sometimes doubt ourselves and our own ability more than we need to. So it is really important to work on your mindset shift more than anything. And then to go through the steps that I've discussed in today's session, looking at how you're actually feeling right now, especially that self-confidence and self-esteem piece, and also looking at our past and our experience. It is always, like I said at the very beginning, a few of you joined perhaps a little bit later, but it is important to remember as well, it takes focus, resilience, and a little bit of sacrifice to get to the career that you want. You have to be willing to do the work and invest both time and money in yourself to change what's currently happening. And this is why I meet a lot of people over the years who are quite unhappy in their jobs, but they're not willing to do that extra mile. So I think women in their 40s and 50s don't have a disadvantage. I have found that quite a few people have limiting beliefs about what they are capable of and how valuable they are to the job market. I'm seeing it change a lot as well. There are, especially here in Australia, I'm trying to remember the name of it now, but there's a particular job search site for women. I think it's called Work 180, and work180.com or .com.au. And it's specifically a job board designed with women in mind, with more flexibility and sort of considering those challenges that women specifically might have. And the companies who advertise on Work 180, which by the way, I'm not affiliated with, I'm just mentioning it because it's a valuable tool. But all the companies who are listed there are actually vetted by Work 180. So that can be a really good help as well to look in the right places, because as we all know, the big job boards, like in Australia, we've got seek.com.au, similar thing exists in other countries as well. And it can be a little bit daunting and a little bit overwhelming. I trust that answers your question, but I'd love to hear from you one-on-one if you want a little bit further support about that. How do you know if an organization already has the perfect candidate internally, but they advertise externally? This is a great question. It's not quite possible to know is the answer. If the job ad is very, very specific, like overly specific, that might be a clue that they already have someone in mind and they want someone to fill very, very niche specific criteria. Sometimes I've seen that happen in some organizations, but it is a little bit different depending on the company. Specifically as well, and this applies globally, more sort of government roles tend to be more regulated and have quite a rigid application process, so they can appear as if they are very specific, even if that is simply just the process for work, jobs in that line of work. So it's not easy to know, but also it's really good to remember that if you do not throw your hat in the ring, you don't have a chance of getting that job. And in my job interview preparation course, it's actually hugely valuable, even if you haven't got a job interview lined up, because what it helps you do, it helps you with your mindset to prepare for potential job interviews as well and what to sort of attract. So I think that's all the questions we've got in the question panel at the moment. Thank you so much for your questions. I really value your time. Next steps from here is I will be sending you out an email if you are interested at all in the offer or the free ebook. I will include links to that. I'll also be adding you to my weekly career newsletter if you're not already on it. Every Tuesday, I send out a short, sharp video with the weekly career question, and I really welcome you to submit your questions as well. I really look forward to stay in touch with you. Stay true to yourself, your career right now, and do not shy away from creating that change for yourself. I've really valued this time with you, and I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day wherever in the world you are. All the best, and see you in my next video or session.